So number two, the shift is people are longing for more transcendence than they are imminence. So here's what Kerry would talk about, and I agree with him. The attractional church model focused a lot on the imminence of God, meaning like his presence is right here. We can understand him. He's comprehensible. What that looks like is, 5 keys to a healthier marriage, three tips for a better prayer life, all those kinds of very practical, almost like very head information. But people and culture are longing for experiences of transcendence. So the transcendency of God, both are true of God's character, his immanence and transcendence, but people are longing for encounters. They're longing for transcendence, something bigger than themselves. And so he said, and you may have heard this before, oftentimes people show up to church looking for God and all they get is us. Like they get a great show, but they might not have actually had an encounter with the living God. And so that's what people are longing for. So the move there, or, the moves that he recommended are, in the attractional model church, we were really good about excellence when it came to the experience. So, we had really well-timed services, planning center. We hit every single transition correctly. And we made sure that we ended right on time, all those kinds of things. He just said, I think we've got to create more space and moments in our experiences for people to have an encounter with God. And our more charismatic Pentecostal friends are great at this kind of thing, where they create moments in the experiences for God to do something. And he talked about the difference between manipulation and evoking. So we've experienced, all of us have had an experience where we felt like we were a little bit manipulated, like they showed just the right video. And then the band, was padding after the video during a time of prayer, and everyone in the service is crying. Like the band knows if they play just the right notes under the pad, everyone will just start crying. It's like really effective. But we walk away from that experience feeling a little bit manipulated and maybe even a little bit dirty. Whereas evoking is not manipulation, but it's creating space for God to do something and allowing the Spirit to work in people's hearts and lives without it being manipulative. And it's a fine line between the two. But what he's seeing, and what I agree with him, I'm seeing a lot more even in our network, is churches that are creating moments and creating space for encounter. They're seeing a lot more effectiveness than everyone that just has a perfectly timed service.
So I want to ask you one question, then I want to go back to these guys and find out from them how they see it in their church and how they put that into operation in their Sunday services in particular. But the question I've got, which comes right up and out of a message about an hour before we jumped on from someone, a pastor in our network had put it on our group chat, talking about a kind of move of the Spirit, the kind of stuff you were talking about in church on Sunday, where they dumped the preach and they just kind of rested around a prophetic word. And his comment was, when this happens, I'm always worried as to how that works for unchurched people.
Yeah.
And he went on to tell a story about how there was an unchurched person there and they loved it. But yeah, that's the issue, isn't it? How do we get more fruity in the Spirit, as it were, and still make it the kind of thing that isn't weird and scares off unchurched people?
Well, I think the key there, Duncan, is, and I've seen this done well, and I've seen it done poorly in very recent days. It comes back to assume they're in the room. Bring people on the journey. Don't assume that everyone in the room knows and understands what's happening. Because here's the frank reality. I've been in church my entire life. And even in those moments, sometimes, when I'm visiting my more Pentecostal or charismatic friends, I don't know what's happening. I've been in church 40 plus years. Yeah, I love that, Leon. Encounter with explanation. So be the guide that assumes they're in the room and bring them on the journey, because even half of your Christians probably don't know exactly what's going on. And it's a discipleship moment even for them to explain, what's happening and why it's so important. So yeah, to me, it's about being that guide who brings everyone in the room on the journey by explaining what we're doing and what's happening, that kind of thing.